Okay. So welcome to what is turning out to be our monthly Zoom meetings. When we started out talking as a board about how often we wanted to hold Zoom calls available to people that were interested, we were thinking, oh, once a quarter or something like that. But now we are looking at our upcoming schedule, and we have this meeting today that you've all joined. And then Zach Doherty, who's here also with Michael and myself and Kathleen Travers, he's going to present a kind of Q&A and continuing questions about the Y-DNA project on May 17th at noon. So again, that's just next month. And then we'll have a fun beginning Irish language class with a woman named Molly who offers that as a business, but she's going to give it to us as a freebie, which we're pretty excited about. That will be June 21st at noon. So this is getting off of it's a less serious subject where we can all try to learn a bit of Irish to connect with our Irish heritage. And then we're going to have an in-person meeting on July 23rd in Carndona in Ireland. And that will be a little bit of AGM annual general meeting, but also to try to help encourage some of the local Dohertys there to join with us in what we're trying to do here on our global basis. And we're going to have a pub quiz. So if anybody happens to be in the Inishowen Donegal area on July 23rd, feel free to join us. That will be at 7:30 in the evening because nobody local in Ireland thinks you can gather earlier than that. So that's kind of the upcoming plans. I'm going to turn the time over at this point to Michael, and he's going to introduce himself and give our presentation.
Okay, well, a couple items of business. So the storms went through the Midwest, fried my router. So my new one doesn't have the coverage I like. So I'm in a spare room in a recliner. So I promise I'm not going to slide out of my chair and fall asleep on you. I've got an intro slide. We'll talk more about me in a couple of minutes. But because I am in a small location on a laptop, I need to now shuffle all my little windows so I can see my stuff. And I'm going to turn off my camera for the duration of the slide set so you can pay attention to the slides and not my face. And I'll pop back on when we're done so we can answer questions and kind of have more for a free-for-all. Now, hopefully I've left enough time so we can have some meaningful discussion because I know this is going to generate a lot of questions. Unfortunately, for those people who view it later, they won't be able to do the Q&A in real time, but Zach will be available next month for us to do that. So let me first stop my camera. Let me move around all my windows so I can see what I'm doing. And here we are. Okay. So we're going to talk about Y-DNA and how it affects the Ó Dochartaigh or O'Doherty surname. And so, oops, if I can advance my slides. There we go. Right? Okay. Okay, so my name is Michael Lacopo. I've been a genealogist since 1980. I've been doing professional research since 2004. I was an early adopter of genetic genealogy or using DNA to do research with starting testing, actually devising DNA testing models to solving problems before they were even commercially available. So I've been at this for a while, and I do love the power of DNA to help us answer tough genealogical questions. So hopefully I can get you all equally as interested. My last name is Lacopo, which is Italian. So I want to assure you that I'm not an imposter, that I belong here for a reason. My maternal grandfather was a Doherty, and it was very interesting because if you asked him how to pronounce his name, it would be Doherty, it'd be Docherty, it'd be Docherty, it'd be Doherty. And so he changed it on a whim, depending on how Irish you want to sound. And just a disclaimer, when I go through the slide set, I will default to this spelling only because it is the spelling I am familiar with. My fingers just type that spelling. So whether you spell it with an O, whether you spell it D-O-H, or some people spell it D-O-C-K, regardless of spelling, we all know we all belong together. This is just my default spelling. And so don't take offense at that. I'm not removing anyone from the inclusion of our full clan. So my Doherty ancestry goes back to early 18th century America, from New York to Virginia to Ohio to Indiana. So I know a lot of people on this side of the ocean do have Irish Dohertys that came during the famine. In the 19th century, there are many colonial ancestors, but then, of course, we have just as many people still in Ireland who are working on their Doherty ancestry. This is where the place that I come from in my research, and that, in its own right, holds its own set of problems research-wise, as does any research in Ireland, and we'll kind of hit that here in a little bit. So it was very tough putting this slide set together because I had to contend with people who are just here because, oh, hey, I'm a Doherty. This is interesting. Have no background in genetic genealogy, are not advanced genealogists, maybe just have an interest at this point in time. So we are going to try to approach this from people who have no knowledge all the way up to the people who do this regularly and want to learn a little bit more about it. And so that covers a huge amount of people and makes putting a slide set very difficult. As I mentioned, I'm a professional genealogist and I do lecture for a living, but I lecture to people who do this all the time. And so not all of you are advanced genealogists, and maybe many of you have not done any DNA testing at all, and that's fine. What I do want to emphasize is that we are going to dig a little deep today, and we're going to learn a little bit about what you're testing and why it gives you information. And you may be overwhelmed. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I just want you to absorb the concept. You don't have to memorize the terminology. You don't have to, throw your hands in the air and say, wait, this is way over my head. I can't do this. I just want you to understand what you're testing, what it tells you, and why it's important for Doherty researchers. Sorry, I get dry when I lecture, so I'm going to be sucking on my coffee as we talk. Now, when you do Y-DNA testing, there is, through Family Tree DNA, a Doherty surname group. And Zach, who's here with us today, is one of the administrators of the group. So, there are people to help you. I am not an administrator of the group, but I do nag Zach on almost a daily basis. So we do work together, and we're all here to help you. But Zach is very generous in his time and his knowledge, and he knows Y-DNA like the back of his hand. And if you belong to the surname group and you share your findings, then Zach can help weave that into a larger Doherty family tree. So when we talk about how this helps you genealogically, you're not doing this alone. You're not trying to navigate this all by yourself. The navigation, once you have your test results, we can help you navigate. So again, another reason not to be overwhelmed. We are going to talk a lot about the dynamics and the basis for testing on what Y-DNA testing is. And so it will be a bit much. I'm just saying again, don't freak out. Absorb the concept. There are people, all you really have to do is swab your cheek, send it in, and people will help guide you along the way. So in review, Y-DNA or Y chromosomal DNA is DNA on the Y sex chromosome. So all people have sex chromosomes that determine their biological sex. If you're a woman, you're an XX. If you're a man, you're an XY. Well, if you're a woman who has an XX, you don't have a Y to test. Only men do. And because it is a Y chromosome that defines biological male sex, we get those as men from our fathers, who get it from their fathers, who get it from their fathers, who get it from their fathers. Now, theoretically, this is passed unchanged. But that's theoretically, but that's not realistically. And those changes are what help us determine genealogical significant findings. But in review, Y chromosome DNA is just passed from male to son to male to son to male to son. And there were some questions when we posted this upcoming lecture um, on Facebook. People were like, oh, like a woman would post and she's like, my dad's a Doherty and I have a son, so can I test my son? Well, no, because there's a woman in between. If your father was a Doherty and you're a woman, you didn't get that Y, so you can't pass that on. So you need to find a male surrogate. We're going to talk about that in a second. So the nice thing about Y DNA when it comes to Western genealogy is that in most Western cultures, the surname of the father is bestowed upon his children. Same thing with surnames. So when it comes to doing Doherty Y DNA testing, if you're a Doherty, you have Doherty Y DNA, supposedly. And there'll be reasons why you don't, and we'll discuss that in a moment as well. So surnames match your Y DNA, technically in most Western cultures. And that will hold true in Ireland, and that will hold true in the United States in most situations. So in the purely most basic form, if you're a Doherty by name, you have Doherty Y DNA. Now, obviously, there are many, many exceptions to that rule, and that will come up in some of the examples. But it is passed from father to son, father to son, father to son. So you have to have that unchained male chain of biology there for your Y DNA to be Doherty Y DNA. Now, if you are a woman and say you were born a Doherty and you want to know more about your Doherty ancestry, but you can't test because you don't have that Y chromosome, you can get a male surrogate. So you can test your brother or your father or your uncle or your nephew. So there's lots of people in your family that can test, and hopefully that's the immediate family, but that may not always hold true. And I had someone else ask this question as well online. Say, like in my situation, so my grandfather was a Doherty, and I was lucky enough to test him before he died. But once he's passed, so he had he just had two daughters. He had a brother who had no children. He had two uncles who had no children. He had a number of great uncles who had sons, but they're dead. And so if I were to find another Y DNA substitute for my family, I can't test because I'm a Lacopo. My mother can't test. Of course, she's deceased, but my mother can't test because, she didn't have the Y chromosome. So I have to go back to 1765 to my Doherty ancestor and move forward through one of his other children. And so for me to find another male surrogate to test, and I need to because my grandfather's DNA ran out at Family Tree DNA, my options are limited. So I have to go way back in my tree, move forward again through a different male line, and then ask a perfect stranger to test. So it is feasible. You can do it, but sometimes finding a male surrogate of interest is going to be difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. So you have to go back to your earliest Doherty who had male children and find an unbroken male line down to the present day. This is important for Zach and for all of us. When you test through Family Tree DNA, they will ask you for your most distant male ancestor. This has to be the person you know who is your male ancestor. And if you're not doing a lot of DNA, if that's just your grandfather or your great grandfather, again, we can help you. We can help you move that tree back. But don't go online and don't find a fictitious tree that takes you back to the 15th century and label that as your most distant male ancestor because it won't help us because it's not proven. It's usually fiction. It's not going to link us into the tree where we know you belong. We can work together and move your tree backwards as far as possible, but very, 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 very few of us, and that very, very, very means like less than 1%, can take your Doherty ancestry back that far. This is my personal plug here. Like, oops, if I can move my slide. No, my slides just freeze. There we go. None of you descend from a fictitious Michael Moore. Like, this is my pet peeve. This man has shown up in many, 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 many trees. He doesn't exist. He's a conglomeration of multiple men named Michael in colonial Virginia. He's given like three fictitious sons. Well, they existed, but they are not his sons. That has been proven through Y-DNA. And this is just another reason why Y-DNA is important because it breaks down these horrible perpetuated myths. And unfortunately, that is the woeful nature of the internet right now, is that misinformation travels faster than information. Um, and the power of Y-DNA can show us that we can tear these apart. And so, for whatever reason, this man in colonial America has been the goal of all Dohertys to move back to this man. I've seen people actually whose trees go back to Ireland in the 1800s, but they'll move back to a fictitious man who lived in Virginia to tie themselves to this individual. If you come across this name in your research, throw it out, start over. This was put together by a very bad tree that was interwoven a few pieces of fact in the 1980s, and it's taken off on a life of its own. So again, a pet peeve of mine. Do not put this man in your tree because I'll hunt you down and I will beat you. So yes, that's the power of Y-DNA. We can fix these things. Another rule in reality is that Y-DNA surprises do occur. So this is important. This is the caveat. This is the risk of DNA testing. Is that if you do your Y-DNA and it does not match anyone in the database named Doherty, um, you are not genetically a male Doherty. And what does that mean? It means there was a break in your line. Now, that break could have occurred in 1456 or could have occurred in 1956. So you have to be prepared that Y-DNA surprises occur. And it is not uncommon. I've seen it way too many times. Unfortunately, I contacted a complete Doherty stranger to test for me because he was on a line I was researching. He thought it was a great idea. He thought it was just really cool. It was like problem solving with DNA. And when we DNA tested him, he came back not a Doherty, and it turned out his father wasn't his father. And so I created a significant level of angst for someone who didn't know that. Um, and now it's unfortunate. I mean, plain and simple, that's unfortunate. And of course, we tell everyone this when we do DNA testing is that surprises may occur. And when you don't expect, when it seems like, yeah, I get it, I understand, I'm willing to take that risk, but then it comes back that, your daddy ain't your daddy or your grandfather ain't your grandfather, then, you brought that upon yourself. And it happens. So that anytime we do a DNA lecture, we do have to put that caveat in there that when you Y-DNA test, surprises can happen. Now, if you do, and that doesn't, when you get a Y-DNA and it doesn't match any other Dohertys, it is true that that break could have occurred with your father, but that break could have occurred, in the 13th century. And so we know that, in Irish history, that certain clans took in other members and made them kind of honorary Dohertys, so to speak, adopted them into the culture. Adoption, foundlings, stepchildren, all these things occur back in time that we have no knowledge of. And so if you come back with quote unquote, non-Doherty DNA, we do have people in the Doherty Project like that. And if I remember correctly, and I may misspeak, there's a colonial man named Cornelius Doherty. All of his descendants have quote unquote non-Doherty DNA, but they are a Doherty cluster that we can define. And where that break occurred was actually pre-18th century. And we don't know why the break occurred. But it does not make you any less a Doherty, but it does put you in the project, and we can find clusters that show that this break occurred at, roughly a certain level of time. But know that, Y-DNA testing can come with a little bit of a risk. Eh, my, why am I not advancing here? Okay, hold on. Okay, just clicking. I'm just making noise with my computer. There we go. So why should you test? So why is Doherty genealogy so difficult? I mean, Doherty is a super common Irish name, so it's really hard to split everyone apart. And technically, all Doherty men are related. So this is not like having the surname Smith or Miller, where that name arose from an occupation in multiple lines in multiple countries. Uh, if you're looking at Y DNA and you're looking at Doherty men, because Doherty is a clan name that is several centuries old, we all technically descend from, one single man. So all Y DNA Dohertys are related. So how can Y DNA help me if we're all from the same huge clan? Um, okay, so yeah, so why is Doherty genealogy so difficult? It's a super common name. We're technically all related. All Doherty men are related. We know that any research in 18th century Ireland and before is very, very, very difficult, if not virtually impossible. Of course, nothing's impossible, but still. And for those people on this side of the ocean, colonial Irish immigration records, yeah, it doesn't they don't exist. And then we do, I mean, like many cultures, I do a lot of German research, and Germans are just as bad as the Irish, is that they're not very unique or inventive with their given names. So all the Johns and James and Thomases and Davids and Daniels all get kind of very confusing to parse apart. So Doherty DNA or Doherty genealogy, by its very nature, is difficult. Now, when we talk about Y DNA testing, we're going to talk about family tree DNA because that is essentially the only place that's going to offer genealogical Y DNA testing. Now, there are various sites that you can do it, but you really can't incorporate it into our larger project. And so this is kind of your go-to place. So family tree DNA is where you're going to test. And I am not advancing properly. And they do offer three tests: a Y37, a Y11, and a big Y700. And these are the current US prices on there. So it's a little bit of an investment. I mean, the Y37 is not terrible, but it does move up to the big Y. And unfortunately, I'm going to tell you why big Y is probably your best bet for incorporating it into more intense research. But yes, these are the prices that are present right now. Always have sales, always have discounts. There's always ways to bring that price down. So when we talk about like Y111, Y37, Y700, 37 what? 111 of what? 700 of what? And so this is where we're going to dig a little deeper into what Y DNA testing tells us. So when we talk about 37, 111, 700, we're talking about values at certain specific named markers on the Y DNA chromosome. This is the basis for Y37, Y111, Y700. And you'll see on the side of that slide there, Y67 was a test that was offered for a while. Don't really know why they've taken it out because I like it better than 37, but nonetheless, you can't purchase that. You will see when you get your results back that you can look at Y67 testers. So I'll show you that in a moment. But so that's why Y67 is still on there, but that's not an available test at the moment. So when you're testing now, in years past, you used to be able to download the certificate. You can't anymore. They don't offer it. It's nice for slide sets because it can show you that a little bit more compactly. So this is my grandfather that I tested before he died. And so this will tell you at specific markers what his value is at that marker. And so this is one way to pictorially see what those values are. Like I said, they don't offer that certificate anymore. If you go on their site, it looks like this. Same thing as what that certificate showed you. It's these named markers and what the value is under that marker. If you go to the Y-DNA Doherty project, it's going to look like this. Same thing. Here's your test kit number. I'm going to need to take off my glasses here. Here's your test kit number over here. Your most distant ancestor surname, a little bit of information on your distant ancestor, your country of origin, what your haplogroup is. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And then it gives you all your figures here. And you can see if it's all white and there's no color there, all these numbers match each other. So you see that, all Dohertys match each other. Where there's color is where they don't quite match each other. And we're not going to really go dig deeply into the colors and how to read this chart. I mean, that's kind of out of the scope of this lecture. But these are just pictorial representations for how you'll see your results when you do Y37, Y111, or big Y. Um, So you're like, okay, so what does that value represent? What are these 10, 12, 12, 16, 8? What does that mean? So this is where we're going to dig a little deeper. And again, like I said, don't get overwhelmed, just kind of grasp the concept. On the Y DNA chromosome, there are spaces at those markers that have been shown on that previous page, where you get what they call short tandem repeats, STRs. I like to think of those STR that stands, whoops, wrong way, stands for stutters. So this is where your DNA stutters. You get these repetitive links of base molecular pairs, CTA, 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 CTA. So at these known locations on the Y chromosome, you get these stutters, these short tandem repeats. If you've got 5 stutters there, you get a value of 5. If you get 6, you get 7. And so this is what that number represents. These are known locations on the Y DNA chromosome where you get these repetitive repeating patterns. Don't pay attention to this right now. We'll come to that. But this is what you're measuring at that level. So when you do your Y37 or Y111, at 37 or 111 defined markers on the Y DNA chromosome, they're measuring how many stutters, how many short tandem repeats you have at that area. That's what the 5, the 6, the 7 is at that area. So that's what you're going to get. That's what they're testing. These are called STRs. Think of them as that's where your Y DNA stutters on the chromosome. And so they're measuring that. That's what they're measuring at the 37 or the 111 or the 700. So let's go back and look at that certificate. So for example, on my grandfather's at marker DYS 391, which is a defined marker that they all test for, my grandfather has 11 stutters up there. So that's what the test results are telling you. Now, you don't really need to know that 11 or 10 or 9 means anything significant. I'm just telling you what those numbers represent. So that's what's called an STR. And that's what they're measuring at those 37 or 111 locations. So how does this help you genealogically? Well, unique configurations of those STR patterns are what are unique to certain surnames. So if you're a Lacopo or a Miller or a Smith or a Doherty or a McGillicuddy or a Timmons, you're going to have a unique STR pattern that is unique to a surname. And so if you are just starting your Y-DNA adventure and you are of a surname, say you're there's a million surnames and I just suddenly am blank. So like, well, say you're a Lacopo. So if I do a Y37 and I find someone who matches me exactly at 37 markers, oh, look, they're a Lacopo. Well, that makes sense because these STR patterns are unique to certain surnames. And so oftentimes, that's one way that adoptees can sometimes get a hint on what their paternal name is. Say you're an adoptee, you don't know who your father is, you do a Y-DNA, a Y37, and all your matches are Smiths. Well, that would mean that generally you are probably a Smith as well. The closer your STR pattern matches another person, the closer you're related to them. So what family tree DNA shows you this as genetic distance. So if you do a Y111 and someone matches you at 110 out of 111 markers, you are a genetic distance of 1 from that person. So if you do a 37 and someone matches you on 35 of those markers, you are a genetic distance of 2 from them. So obviously, common sense would dictate that if you do a Y-DNA test and someone matches you pretty darn closely, the closer you match, the more closely you're related. That's how it works. That is, there are Of course, many nuances to that, but that makes sense, because these STR patterns are unique to surnames. You're going to find matches that way. Well, there is some problem with that if you're a Doherty. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. Why is this bad? Well, if all Doherty males all descend from the same clan, that we all share the same common ancestors, that we all carry a name that originated in the 12th century, which is very, very early for surnames, we will, theoretically should, all match every Doherty on Y37 and Y111. So if you're Doherty and you all have the same male ancestor, even though that male ancestor may have lived 900 years ago, we should all still match to some level on any Y test. And these STRs, these stutters, do mutate rapidly. So in some cases, a 5 can become a 6. You get an extra stutter. They mutate rapidly, not always predictably, a little bit randomly. So, obviously, if you've got a perfect match, that's a good indicator that you're a close relative. But the reason that doing low Y testing in a Doherty is bad is because we technically all are related to each other. So Y testing, there's a little bit more nuance when you're doing Doherty research. So it's a little bit more of a challenge than if you had a different surname. So here, let me show you an example. So I have tested numerous Dohertys in my family tree, numerous cousins near and far, but I do know they all descend from the same progenitor. And so if I look at this is my grandfather's test. I'm comparing his matches to my grandfather. So this is me signed on to Family Tree DNA under my grandfather's test results and looking at his matches. Well, here we see if we're looking at the 37 marker comparison. Now, ignore this on the side. This means nothing. This is how big they've all tested, but this is not what we're looking at. So ignore these numbers here. This is what we're looking at here. So at 37 markers, this is a comparison for 37. My grandfather matches a Doherty, a Doherty, a Doherty, a Doherty, and a Brown. Okay, well, you'll find that, obviously, like I said, Y-DNA surprises occur. So this Brown probably has a Doherty in his family tree he doesn't know about. But I see these, and this would make sense. Like my grandfather's a Doherty, so his matches should be primarily Dohertys. But I've tested numerous people who I know are related. I know what their relationship is to my grandfather, and I know that they are all related within a genealogical time period. Yet the only one who rises to the top he's the first one. He's a 36 out of 37 match, but so are these. These are still good matches, but I don't know how they're related. And the people I know are related should rise higher, shouldn't they? But they don't. And that's why 37 testing can be really unrewarding for a Doherty, is because you're going to match all Dohertys. You're just going to. How close they match isn't going to be, you're not going to be able to tell that on a Y37 test. Now, if I move up and do a 67 test, ignore the smiley face, that's just hiding someone's picture, trying to anonymize results here. So like I said, you can't do a 67 test anymore. They don't offer it, but you can look at your 67 matches. So I put that in the slide set. Even though you can't buy a Y67, you can look at your matches at a 67 marker level. So if I look at that, then look, Brown rises to the top. He's a 66 out of 6, right here, excuse me, one step. He's a 66 out of 67 match. That looks really darn good, right? So, and again, here's a Y-DNA mistake. He's one of mine. We found his grandfather was raised by a Stroop, but born of a Doherty. So we know that he's a Doherty through other means, but his surname can throw you off if you don't know who he is. But these are two of my testers. So again, the people I know should be related don't rise to the surface. These other people do. And actually, Brown rises higher. He's a 66 out of 67 match. He's a one step genetic distance. This looks like a good match. And if you do, you can't do 67 testing, but if you did, you'd be looking at these people, this Brown and these two Dohertys, to see how they're related. And if you do chase them, you find out that they are not closely related. They may be related like in the 1600s or the 1500s, so quote unquote close compared to other Dohertys, but you really aren't really separating the wheat from the chaff yet at 67. If you do a 111, here's a Duncan now, and again, I know this is one of my testers. His father was born a Doherty, knew he was born a Doherty, but he was adopted by the Duncans. So again, this may look misleading if you don't know it, but he's a Doherty. He's a Doherty. These are all Dohertys. And when I do a comparison at 111, these are all my testers. So I had to go up to Y111 testing to really bring these to the top. So these Y111 matches are better than a Y37, which would make sense, right? Because you're doing more intensive testing. But still, if I were to show you like the pages and pages and pages of matches, is Doherty, 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 which you would expect because as male Dohertys from a clan that originated many centuries ago, we should all match each other. But look at this, like none of these matches, even though they're my family, none of these are perfect 111 out of 111 matches. This is a two-step deviation, 109 out of 111 match. This is a four-step deviation. This is one of my relatives, but he's only a 107 out of 111 match. So I don't know if I didn't see who's here. I was actually messaged by someone who recently did a Y DNA test, and I think he's a 10-step, six-step difference than mine. Um, and that's good, but it's not great. And that's the problem with testing for Dohertys is that we will all match each other. So Y111 brings the better matches to the top, but even those fall off pretty quickly. So once you get beyond four steps, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 step difference, they're all Dohertys, but they may not be closely related. So unlike other surname testing, Y111 is good, maybe great, but not excellent. So we are a more difficult surname to tear down or divvy apart because we're all related over a long period of time. I hope that makes sense. And showing you that, Y30, if you do a Y37, your matches are going to be pretty unrewarding. They just don't tell you enough. So, yes, genetic distance can be misleading because the STR mutations are variable. The accuracy of your matches do improve with more intensive testing. So Y111 is definitely going to be better than Y37. But because we all have a common male ancestor as far back as 900 plus years ago, how do we make more meaningful matches? And again, there's a little frowny face. If you're doing Doherty DNA testing, we'll talk about a plan for your testing in a moment. But Y37 is not going to yield a ton of information. It'll prove you're a Doherty. I mean, that's a good start. But it's not gonna, your matches are gonna mean very little at Y37. And that really holds for most testers. Y37 for anyone is kind of a really weenie test. Again, another reason why I'm shocked they dumped Y67. It was a better starting place. And Y37 is a fine place to start. And we'll talk about that. But your matches are not going to be terribly significant. So this is where Big Y700 is your best bet as a Doherty researcher. Of course, they measure 700 different markers at defined locations. Obviously, looking at 700 markers is better than looking at 111. So it is a far more intensive test. Um, they're also measuring for the presence or absence of certain SNPs, SNPs. And they're also discovering new ones. And you're like, whoa, wait a second, Mike. I don't know what a SNP is. We just talked about stutters, STRs. What are SNPs? Now, this is something unique to the big Y, and this is going to be very significant. And this is where we have got to kind of go into the weeds here. So hang on. This is going to be a little bumpy ride. So it's measuring for SNPs. What's a SNP? Well, we saw this slide already. This is the stutter. You see that highlighted there. Those are where they're measuring at the 37, 111, or 700. They're still measuring these at the Y700, but they're also measuring these. This is unique to the big Y. These are what are called single nucleotide polymorphisms. So in your chain of Y-DNA, you have all DNA is made from four basic building blocks: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. All those four basic nucleotide building blocks of life. The strings of those are who define is what defines who we are. So G, T, A, C, A, G, A. Those are that string of DNA is what defines you essentially as a human being. Occasionally, one of these will change. I think you can see my cursor on here. This is what's called a single nucleotide polymorphism, or a SNP. So SNPs are when one of these basic building blocks in the entire chain of your Y-DNA change. They just suddenly just go blip, and you've got a mutation that just defined a completely different Y-DNA chromosome than those that came before it. Now, this defines your haplogroup. This gives you a kind of a name for where you belong on the family tree of mankind. So your haplogroup defines a haplogroup is basically a group defined by this long string of DNA. When this changed from A to T, you created a new haplogroup. You became a new subgroup on the family tree of mankind. So these happen rarely. They mutate much more slowly than the STRs. One study showed that they maybe happen every 100 years. So you can think about that. Like if the Doherty surname has been around for 900 plus years, these SNPs have occurred within that time frame, but far less frequently. Now, this thinking that's from a 2013 paper. That's already a decade old or more. And that maybe that thought may be changing because we're measuring more of them. And so what the big Y700 test does is it measures for these known SNPs. Like we know where some of these changes have occurred and we've defined them through other tests. But as we test more Dohertys, we find new mutations and we can then define them and give them new haplogroup names. I hope that makes sense. So these are rare. Let's summarize. These are rare mutations that occur roughly every 100 years, give or take. When they occur, you then now have created a new branch on the family tree of mankind, or in a smaller sense, the Doherty family tree. That new branch is given a new name, which is called a haplogroup. So these are where they start dividing over time. Because these are more slowly mutating markers, they define groups more readily and more definitively than the STRs. So that's where big Y is far more powerful at finding your close relatives and where you fit than the Y37 or Y111 when it comes to Doherty research. So here's my grandfather's haplogroup tree. And you're like, whoa, wait a second. This just shows you, like, this is what you're going to be presented with. You don't have to know this, okay? And these freaking numbers change all the time. Like geneticists love to change the names of these markers. And so you don't need to know them. It's just that this is an old haplogroup starting up here that's many thousands of years old. And as more DNA testing has been done, it's been refined. So most Irish people have the haplogroup M222. That is a mutation that occurred. It's called, in the family tree DNA calls it the Celtic mystery ancestor, because apparently it just seems like all Irish men descend from RM222. But that originated around 100 BC. So that's like 2,000 years old. That's not going to help you genealogically. So in the past, these haplogroups used to be more anthropological. They helped scientists study migratory movement in primitive man. But we've gotten better at this. And so as we've moved forward, we've refined these and found new mutations. My grandfather is now defined by a haplogroup. This is a mutation that occurs only in his line and not in other Doherty's, as Y137170. Name means nothing. Don't worry about the name. Um, but it shows that we've refined this and found new mutations that have gone down into my group. Now, Family Tree DNA defines this haplogroup as originating around 1735 AD. I mean, that is very much a significant genealogical finding. You know, someone born in 1735, we can document. Someone born in 100 BC, we cannot. So we've been able to refine these haplogroups down to present genealogical timeframes. And I'm going to show you this in the next few slides. So this hopefully will kind of gel a little bit. But the other thing I want to point out, oops, say someone tests and they come up as a BY31357, but you test and you're this Y137170. These are, I mean, this is just further down the river. Okay. So like these are still from the same line. This is just a more refined test. So some people will get different haplogroup determinations and they don't quite match the person you know you're related to. It just depends on your level of testing. Now, if you do Y700, the match should pan out. But even if you do a Y111, they'll give you a suspected haplogroup. So it's not as refined test. Say you do a Y111 and you're called a BY471, but you know you're related to my grandfather. So why aren't you the same? It's because you did a less refined test and you're further upstream. So I get a lot of questions about that too. It's like, well, my haplogroup's not the same as yours, but I know we're related. That's because you did a less refined test and you don't have all those markers tested. Big Y tests all those. So all I want you to get from this is that Big Y is testing for these very rare mutations or less common mutations. And these mutations define a name called a haplogroup that puts you on the family tree of mankind. And those haplogroups are becoming so refined that they are now in a genealogical time frame. So this is directly from the Family Tree DNA's website. Why should you do a big Y? Estimated time to most recent common ancestor. So it gives you those time frames, which are really important. It refines your haplogroup, identifies unique mutations to your family. Lifetime, as long as your test stays up on Family Tree DNA, your analysis does improve and you get new information. But here's what they say. Here's one of their big selling points. Link your recent genealogy with ancestors who have lived before the adoption of surnames. That doesn't hold true for us because the Doherty surname's been around much longer than most others. So unfortunately, Big Y700 is going to be, I don't want to say the go-to test for Doherty genealogy, but it's going to be the most important. To put us on the Doherty family tree, it is almost necessary to do this. Don't get me wrong, Y111 is still very powerful. Y37, not so much. So yes, I do think it's an investment, but I think Big Y tells us more. Now, this is what they call the Family Tree DNA block tree. Zach is going to be doing another class next month that's going to kind of walk you through the Family Tree DNA site. These are all the people I've tested. And again, these are not Doherty's in name today, but we know they've got Doherty ancestors. And so they all fall under this haplogroup. Now, this tree, you can see up here that there's the haplogroup tree. Now, I'm not going to use images from Family Tree DNA because a tree goes up. It's very hard to put that on a slide set that's more long than it is tall. Now you see that their block tree is based on the big tree by Alex Williamson, so I'm going to use his tree. It's the same thing. I'm just using it for the graphic purposes. Now, if you look really, 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 really close at your screen, you can see all the names here are Doherty, 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 Doherty. And we all fall under the umbrella of a haplogroup called FGC8840. Again, don't get wound up on the names. They don't mean anything. But through research, we know that this mutation that defines this haplogroup occurred roughly in the year 1000 to 1100 AD. Well, isn't that amazing that all Dohertys fall under that umbrella? Because that's about the time the Doherty surname originated. So historical mythology, historical lore is now being proven with Y-DNA testing. If you look really closely there, you see that all those testers, these are the surnames of people testing today, all those testers are McDevitt's and McDavitt's. Well, why are McDevitt's and McDavitt's falling under the Doherty umbrella? Well, because it is a surname that was created by the descendants of David O'Doherty, who died in 1208. And so we are now showing that some of these deviations of Doherty or changes in surname that are historic are actually being shown to be proven through Y-DNA testing. And so we have a McDevitt group under the Doherty umbrella for a reason. It makes sense. Now, as we move down the tree, we're going to like show here's another mutation that occurred around 1680 AD. So again, not quite genealogical. I mean, some people can take the tree back to the 1680s, but we start seeing that again, all Dohertys. Let's go down even further where my family lies. And there's all my tests. I've tested more. I just didn't. This is an older screenshot. It's just so hard to do outlines and animations. So I just use an older one. Just know that there are more names under this Y13710. So these are the tests at this point in time. These are the 4 people I tested. One's my grandfather. He's this one. He's a descendant of James Doherty through his son Thomas. 2 of them are through James's son Daniel. James was born in 1740. Another one is a descendant of James' brothers Anthony, who's born about the same time. He died in 1792. These all belong to the same family. These are all my family that I've done research on. And they all have been defined by a unique mutation that created this haplogroup. If you look at family tree DNA, they define that mutation to have occurred around 1735. And if you look at the paper trail, these all descend from a man born around 1715. So it really matches up pretty closely. So we can see then that these all are people I've tested. They're known relatives, and they all are defined by a unique marker, a unique mutation. Now, here's some people who are nearby. They don't have this mutation, but they have a mutation 1 generation back. So this mutation behind it occurred probably in the 1680s. And so I know that these people who tested may be related further back if we were able to go back further. So if you're doing Doherty DNA testing, you now have some clues for people who may be related, but you also get clues on how closely they're related. So you get time frames, you get clues, you get clusters, and you've better defined our Doherty family tree. So why should you test? Why should you Y-DNA test? Why should you big Y test? So these mutations, there's thousands of them identified every year. So the Y-DNA family tree of mankind is getting bigger by the day. But the Doherty Y-DNA tree is getting bigger as well. Like I mentioned before, it used to be thought it was only anthropological. It was actually just kind of proving migratory patterns of mankind in the distant past. But we're now being able to use big Y testing to help us with our genealogy. So with a Doherty surname, when we identify these mutations that are unique to certain branches, we do find people who are more closely or more distantly related to us. We're able to separate multiple Doherty men in a haplogroup where we don't have a paper trail. And we're going to touch on that again. So like in review, the Doherty surname has been around for a long, long, long time. It is the 15th most common surname in Ireland today. So research is hard because they're all related. Early Irish research is difficult. And we have no way to split these people apart with an absent or meager paper trail. And Y-DNA can change that. So again, there's the big tree again. There's my marker that defines my family. Um, so if someone tomorrow tests and they do a big Y and they find that, oh, I'm a big Y and this defines my haplogroup, they already know through other testing that they belong in my family. They don't have to do, they may not have done the paperwork, or their paper trail may be meager, or maybe one of my Doherty distant cousins, left Virginia and went over the mountains and went to Kentucky and then to Mississippi and then disappeared from all family and all paper trail. If he's a Y13711730, I know he's my relative. And so as we build our Doherty Y-DNA tree, new testers or people you may test can then know how they're related by how they fit on the big tree. Um, I always tell people, like, I can write the book on early Irish research because it's got no pages, because early research is difficult. Again, if someone does a big Y test and they are a 137170, I know they're related. And the same thing that as you test, or maybe you're a Doherty who's listening right now, you have no idea where your genealogy goes. Maybe you just know the name of your grandfather. If you do Y-DNA testing, you fit yourself on the tree and you find close relatives. Um, and without a paper trail, and with Doherty's all related to each other, finding that haplogroup designation can show you kinship. Um, so as an example, again, my lineage goes back to colonial Virginia, many, many, many misattributed lineages in that time period. Through Y-DNA testing, all these people who descend from this fictitious Michael Moore, they don't have matching Y-DNA. They don't come from the same haplogroup. They all have very deviant haplogroups that are separated by hundreds of years, so they're not related. We know they're not related through Y-DNA testing. So we've taken a long-standing, poorly resourced family tree and we've torn it apart. Um, when you don't have a paper trail to separate all those men of common names, Y-DNA is going to be the only way you can parse them out. And big Y testing may be the only way, especially in America, where you can separate those colonial lineages. But in Ireland as well, I mean, there's so many Dohertys running around, and Dohertys marrying Dohertys. You may have in your family tree, especially if you're up in County Donegal, where you've got a Doherty grandmother who married a Doherty grandfather whose grandparents were also Dohertys. If you find representatives of all those lines, you can find out how closely they're related. And so big Y testing may be the only way we can parse out all these different Dohertys. So you've seen this slide before. So it's a super common Irish name. It's very hard to do Doherty research because there's so many Dohertys running around in the same place in the same time. Big Y can split them apart. And if all Doherty men are related, like, how can we find out who belongs to who? Again, big Y can do that. Doing early Irish research, it's very difficult using a paper trail. If you do Y-DNA testing, you can then find out where your Doherty fits on a Y-DNA tree, maybe not a family tree. Are you going to get names and dates and places from Y-DNA testing? Not necessarily. Maybe, for two reasons. One, as I've shown you, that as we define more mutation haplogroups, we do get a rough date on where that mutation occurred, so we know where our family split from other families. We do find more closely related families in a time frame that may give you more clues for research. And so do we get names and dates? Not in a classic sense, but it can really help us in our research where we don't have paperwork that does the same thing. For Irish who came to this country early, there's absolutely no way to delineate, to find that. There are no such things as colonial Irish immigration records, not generally. You never say never, you never say always in genealogy. But if I find close relatives who share the same haplogroup, maybe that one is in New York and one's in Virginia, I know they must be related. So I can find out if they came together. So I can start looking at patterns to see who migrated where. Were there Irish that moved into England in the or or Irish that mixed with the Scots-Irish diaspora? Like, do we have movement in Europe? Do we have movement in the United States? If we find close relatives through Y-DNA testing, we may be able to find new clues to track our ancestors. Um, they all share the same surnames. Well, Y-DNA testing can help separate those same name men. So um, the plan, yes, I know this is an investment. Not saying everyone has like $450 to throw away. Um, Sales are frequent and often. It's almost never that listed price that always goes down. I told you Y37 is kind of a crappy test to compare, but it's a great start. Like, start with a 37. When you test a family tree DNA, they will bank your DNA. Like, they will bank your sample. So if you do a 37, you get some holiday money, you save a little back, and then you can go on there and you can pay for an upgrade. The upgrade is not the same as the test result. It's a lower price. So you start with 37, then maybe next year you upgrade to 111, and then you get some money and you're like, I need more information. I'm going to upgrade to big Y. You can do it stepwise. You can start low, work up. There's always sales. I'm not going to speak ahead of the game. I mean, we've talked as a clan of trying to find some way to do some fundraising to help people with this. I would love for that to be an option. We don't have any concrete plans, so don't quote me on that, but I would love to find a way that we can all work together to help each other with big Y testing, because big Y testing is really going to put us all on a Y DNA Doherty family tree that's going to be very, very yielding in information. Um, when you do your test, of course, you join the Doherty surname group, which is easy to do. It does help us grow our knowledge and improve our Doherty family tree. And it may be, big Y testing may be the only way in which we identify Doherty lineages. And maybe Zach can even speak. I told you about the McDevitt kind of deviation. We are finding through big Y testing, like some of these ancient manuscripts on where Irish surnames originated do seem to be panning out with big Y testing. So it's really a fascinating historical study as well. Um, so in conclusion, don't worry about the details. Don't memorize the terminology. You don't have to know the names of those haplogroups. Just know what they are. But you've got many of us here to help guide you. You can just do the testing and ask questions later. You can just be like, hey, from this lecture, I got how important this is. I'll do the testing and then I'll nag the hell out of like Zach and Mike and other people to figure out where I fit and what this means. And we can do that for you. It just helps all of us as genealogists. So I'm going to open up for questions. Here's your Y chromosome, that little tiny chromosome, if you're a male, amongst all the others. That's the one we're testing, and I'm encouraging you to do that. So I've gobbled up about an hour. I'm going to change my screen here. I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to open up my camera. And I know it had nothing to do with the interloper, but I apologize for that rude interruption. But hopefully beyond that, you got something out of it. So questions. Let me open the chat and you can I don't know, Kathleen, you're watching them. You can start them, or people can raise their hand, or I'll scan. I gotta take my glasses off because I'm leaning way into the camera.
Does somebody have a specific question?
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah. Can you unmute?
Yeah, as much as you do in Zoom, we always forget to unmute.
We'll have to unmute people, Eva.
Okay, I need to.
There we go. I wanted to first of all, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. I think I've worked with you before, actually, for a keynote for a historical society, Mennonite Life.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it was cool to see you again. I didn't realize we were related. I guess the Doherty side. I'm on family tree DNA. I guess most of my questions are answered by realizing I'm only 37. I only did the 37. I'm thinking I probably need to upgrade because a lot of this is a little confusing and doesn't give me enough information to really.
It's an overwhelming topic. That's why it's really hard to kind of like, I want this lecture to be for everyone, but you got to dig deep because it's not an easy concept to just casually understand.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, 37 is kind of a weenie test, and I think it's a great place to start. But your matches are not gonna have a lot of meaning.
Yeah, like for my surname Stetler, the closest thing is like 3 genetic distances. None of them are Stetlers.
So
So that's
obviously, yeah.
that's
So
one
obviously,
question.
at 37, yeah, those genetic distances mean a lot. So if you're close as a 34 out of 37, that's just a crappy match. So
Okay.
yeah. And you'll see, like I showed that example, if like I said, I liked 67 and I don't know the reason why they dumped it. But like when you move up the scale, you do start the weaker matches. Like you saw in mine, even at 67, that Brown test was really high. It was a 66 out of 67. When
Right.
I moved to 111, it fell way down. It just disappeared. So
Okay.
it's very interesting how your matches can really shift as you upgrade. So yeah, 37 matches are just not great. I mean, I tested mine. I'm a Lacopo. Like, guess how many matches I have? Like, I have none. It's like not even at 37. I have no meaningful matches.
Yeah, that's just frustrating that way. Yeah.
Yeah, if you just did a Y37, if you upgrade to 111, your matches would be more meaningful. But even then, I mean, I wouldn't think Stetler's that uncommon of a name.
No, it's not too common. I mean, uncommon. And then even I'm on the Doherty surname group, Doherty, I guess here. It
Yeah.
even says testers are likely not from an O'Doherty patriline, but my grandmother is a Doherty, so I'm not sure. And my dad's cousin is on this, and I'm definitely connected to him, so I'm not sure what it shows.
Are you connected to him like with autosomal DNA,
Probably.
which is a different beast?
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
autosomal DNA, like the typical ancestry test you do, or the family finder test. So
Yes.
autosomal DNA, that you're measuring the DNA on all your chromosomes, and
Gotcha. That's
so
okay.
so that's when you're testing all your cousins. So so Y DNA is only limited to your Y chromosome. So if
So
you
only
want,
Stetler directly.
yeah, so your Y DNA that you tested is only your Stettler line.
Okay.
So if you want to test a representative of, if you said your grandmother was a Doherty, then like
Yes.
if your grandmother had a brother, then those sons or grandsons can test for you to be your Doherty substitute.
Okay, so that's what I was saying. My cousin, my dad's cousin Michael is part of this group, I think. So
Okay.
he knows all that. So I just should look at his information for the
Yeah,
adopted.
if he shared with you, then you can look at his and see where he tested. If he also just tested at 37, he's going to definitely, and that's why Doherty's more difficult because it's such an old surname that 111 is so much better than 37. But even at 111, like you said, you may get someone who matches like 103 out of 111, and that sounds good, but it's not if you're Doherty because we're all related to each other.
Sure.
So that's where big Y sometimes is necessary to really do some fine splitting. But yeah, for you personally, for yours, yeah, upgrade is definitely the way to
I think I'm
go.
gonna have to go to the Y700. It sounds like to get any good information.
For you, for Stetler, I would do the
Yeah.
111 first and see what that tells you. But
Okay.
I mean, just like my example, it's very interesting how your matches can really fall off and shift. So as you upgrade, those matches they just look different. And
And I'm sorry, the haplo group too changed since I've started this too. Does that make sense?
So as the family tree or as the world family tree has changed, they rename haplogroups, they find different
Gotcha.
mutations that define them. And so over time you're like, hey, my haplogroup designation changed. That's just new science and it just keeps you on your toes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Huh?
Joe, yes.
Video.
There you go.
I tested originally on 37. I had 4 exact matches on that, 2 Darties and 2 other names. But so I went on up to the Y111, but my closest match now is 6 steps away. I was talking with Zach about that piece of it a little bit. If it is that I have no exact matches on Y111, if I do a big Y, it's not going to find any exact matches on that. either, right? Sort of.
So yeah, so even the people I know are related in my tree. I mean, none of them were exact matches at 111. I mean, one was 2 steps different, one was I think 4 steps different. So as you get to 6 step difference, that's the problem with Doherty research is that um, um, those steps are far more nebulous. It's really hard to gauge them. And the thing with mutations are very random and can be very spontaneous. There are many people who test like a father-son can be a genetic distance of 1 because there'll be a mutation in that time period. So, what does your genetic distance of 6 mean? Does it mean that you just yourself have a set of weird mutations that occurred in a very short time period? If you're part of the Doherty project and you can look at your 111 compared to others 111, there's a more detailed way at looking at your mutations and what they mean. There's ways to look at those mutations and give them significance, but that's beyond the scope of this lecture. I know that maybe Zach can answer that a little bit more in depth or if he wants to. Um, I mean, I don't know, Zach, do you know where I'm getting at? Like, looking at, because you've used some tools with the 111 to kind of see where they fit in a bigger family tree. It's less exacting as Big Y. So will Big Y find you better matches? Yes and no. You'll find better matches because that 6 genetic distance may have lesser meaning than you think. Or you may find that you're a completely different haplogroup that doesn't have a lot of good matches right now. And so is it going to give you more information? Maybe. Is it going to give more information to further testers in the future? Yes. So it's kind of like personal good versus the greater good. You'll get a little bit of both, but will the skies open up and rays of sunlight will illuminate your genealogy with Big Y? I don't know. I doubt it. I don't know if Zach wants to comment on that at all.
Bob, you
Yeah,
want
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've actually Joe has recently tested. I actually asked him to test because he had an interesting lineage from what I could see from online trees. Of course, I didn't spend the time to vet because you know how it goes with the online trees, but I was just wondering if we had a representative of that lineage. So he tested. So right now he's sort of the only one I know of that has the potentially an early colonial ancestor tested, and of course that explains why he's a genetic distance of 6 to some individuals. From what I could tell, there's no one else tested from his lineage, although he does fall under that huge umbrella of BY 471, where the McDevitt's are and so forth, the deeper, wider clade. So it again comes down to comparative. I always typically wish or hope that someone with an earlier brick wall ancestor could test 2 people, like say themselves, and then the earliest going all the way up to that brick wall, and then sideways out, and then back down, and then testing to try to get a map of all the mutations, the STRs, the SNPs of that shared common ancestor that is an earlier ancestor than usually what the paper trails can really uncover anything further from. And that way you sort of establish the sets of mutations that ancestor had, and you could compare those then to these other Doherty matches. And it's again a way of, like you said, going beyond a bit of the where the paper trails run dry, especially in Ireland, quite earlier than even in colonial America for that matter. But that's more, it just helps more data to elicit more of a refined connection to then these other lineages that are related, but when by how much. It's more difficult when we only have one tester from a long lineage and not really any known splitting testers from a known split point up that lineage, if that makes sense.
And so the reason you saw that I tested lots of people, and I've tested lots of Big Ys of various relatives of mine, not because I like dropping $450 every few months. It's like for the same reason Zach just mentioned, is that So my line goes back to colonial Virginia, and there's a lot of people who try to interconnect with that line, but I don't believe they belong there. So I was going back to my brick wall. I hate that term because we overuse it. My brick wall ancestor and looking at who I thought were his siblings, found a representative to test along those lines, and then found out they did all match. And so I did use further testing to establish, like I showed you, my designated haplogroup is what, Y137170. Um, I was able to do that by testing multiple presumed relatives. And so I used Y-DNA testing, but had to do multiple tests. Like Zach says, you come along a colonial line that you seem to be the only tester along that line. So unfortunately, it means that you have to like look at all the people who are a cluster of your ancestors who say maybe lived in the 1700s. It's like, oh, there's another Doherty that lived 2 miles away and they witnessed each other's deeds. So that must be a brother. Let me follow him down, find a representative tester for him. If he matches, I'm on the right path. I have now Y-DNA proof where I didn't have documentary proof. And then you'll also establish, if you do a big Y on both of them, you'll establish a new haplogroup that will define your branch so that further testers down the line say someone else tests and they match your haplogroup, you know they're related. So you start to evolve your family tree by working your own brick wall so that then further testers can then collaborate with you as they match. So it's a bigger it's very helpful, but it's kind of it's playing the long game. And it's making your matches occur. I'm a very big proponent of making your matches occur. If you don't have matches, find someone who may be along your line that you think belongs in your line. Prove it through testing them. Then you'll find your match. Then you'll create more data. Then new testers will then be able to match to you down the road. So yeah, you by yourself right now seem to descend from a colonial line that no one else has tested. So that kind of puts you in a like shrug your shoulders. I don't have a lot to go on. So sometimes you have to make your own data. And so I know that's not as rewarding as having a match right away, but sometimes making your match plays the long game. I don't know if that
I,
makes sense.
I have something to add maybe to that. Um, I don't know. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
That's okay.
have,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I have a colonial ancestor proven in colonial Pennsylvania. An Eleanor Doherty who married a Neil Gillespie. The family's very well researched in this country. There were a lot of prominent descendants here. I went to Clonmany, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, or is it Clonmany? I don't know. But I spent some time with a local historian there. And anyway, because she's a woman, I didn't have anybody in this country to pursue. I did that with the Gillespie line, was able to get that Y chromosome, which led me to some other paperwork. And I've recently discovered that the very promising thing on the hearth rolls in 1665, where there are 3 Gillespies, but only because I was searching for testers did I also go into the names of the people they intermarried with here who came from Ireland at the same time, Boyles, Blaines. So I found Boyles, Blaines, and Gillespies and Glen Columkille, all in the same area, just a few farms apart, which is a very promising now avenue to really get something back far. So I feel like I have a lineage that if I could find people that are descended from Eleanor Doherty's siblings, she had one who came to the United States. I've never been able to find any trace of him. But if I could find people there, which leads me to autosomal DNA, where I match with a lot of people from Clonmany, and they all have names from a particular person who lived there who could be Eleanor's father. Um, and I'm matching them on autosomal DNA at low levels, like 7 centimorgans, which is always said, oh, that doesn't mean anything. It's too far back, but it's exactly what the amount you would expect from somebody that far back. And I think that that can give you some other avenues. I don't know quite how to go about contacting all those people to see if we could find a suitable surrogate tester for that
Well,
line.
that's exactly right. So it's like it's using all your genealogical tools in your toolbox. It's using autosomal DNA. It's using some certain levels of suspicion by using, looking at your fan club, your friends, associates, and neighbors. And so you said, like you're saying, you want to find a brother or a male relative of Eleanor to move forward, and that gets tough. I mean, that's a great plan. I mean, that's exactly what you should do. So you're doing using multiple tools to come up with a hypothesis. And a good way to prove or test that hypothesis is doing Y-DNA testing. And for a lot of us whose Doherty line is further back, or you've got maybe even though your father or grandfather may be a Doherty like mine, like there are no available male relatives to test. You have to go way back in your line, move sideways, and then move forward. So
Yeah.
for you, like Joe, like you currently don't have a lot of really potent matches, and your line goes back to a colonial line. I think I looked at yours too, and then of course yours goes back to a colonial line where there's lots of really bad crap published out there that puts you in lines that aren't necessarily right.
Right.
But you may find someone like who may be a good candidate or a good, you've got circumstantial evidence that they're related, and you can follow that line and do a test on that male as well. So sometimes you have to build your own data to test hypotheses. So
Yep.
like Joe, for you, like, your testing alone didn't generate a lot of good matches. Big Y will put you in the Doherty family tree a little bit more securely and a little bit more definitively, but you may either have to recruit more testers from suspected relatives, or by doing more advanced testing, wait for others who do advanced testings will connect along that line. So you've got more of generating some more data. And so, yeah, so your testing alone didn't reveal the answers that you wanted it to, but more testing may do so. Bob, yes. Oh,
Still muted.
Bob, you're on mute. Oh, might have to do that.
I can't really unmute them. That's a tool that I wish I had.
Yeah, that's really annoying.
So while Bob's working on that, I was Zach knows, and I think Mike, you might remember too, that I'm that exact example where my grandparents were both Doherty and all four of their parents were all Doherty. And so I have four different Doherty lines, which my grandparents said were not connected to one another. But I've done 3 big Y tests on cousins and found that 2 of them actually were related to one another. But I'm sure they know that now because they're all in heaven. But the one line, which is my maternal grandmother, or it's paternal, but anyways, my dad's um mother's mother, I cannot find from her father, I cannot find a male Doherty descendant. It's like there were all sorts of girls and the guys never married. So, but there was one young man that went off to America sometime around the time of the Civil War. And if he wasn't killed in the Civil War, then maybe perhaps somebody doing DNA testing might turn out through autosomal to connect with me, that then I can get them to do a big Y and see if it actually is. So I'm
and that's
hoping to get all 4 done.
and that's a good example. I mean, sometimes you can do your due diligence and you can look at your collaterals and go down to find a representative, and they don't exist. There's sometimes a line just dies out. I mean, hey, look at Lacopos. Like I have 2 brothers. I have no children. My other brother has no children. My other brother has daughters. I have one male first cousin who's got 2 daughters. So once we're all dead in this generation, there'll be no Y DNA Lacopos to test. You'll have to go way back into Italy and come back forward. And so sometimes you can do your due diligence and either the lines disappear, like yours went to America and kind of seem to have kind of disappeared at the Civil War. And so you can hope for a tester, or you can, keep digging and looking for that collateral, but sometimes they just die out. And
Yeah.
so we can do all the right things, and sometimes we just don't have a surrogate to test.
Yeah. So Bob,
But
you
Michael, I
muted.
think
I
Bob's
finally,
on.
finally got back.
Yeah,
Well,
welcome back, Bob.
you've been talking about finding matches. I have an exact match at Big Y, and that's my brother.
yeah.
Surprise, surprise. So I did that. I got his just to test it. It should be an exact match, and it is, and that's great.
And when you
But
test a brother or a cousin or a father or a sibling, you can generate new haplogroups too. So it gives you a defined haplogroup as well.
right. Well, and the thing is, I got involved with this back in 2004 with Mike Doherty, who started the Doherty surname group, and eventually he kind of passed off the admin to me. And in 2005, when we went to the reunion, then there were 8 of us who had been tested, and so we started recruiting to try to get more people. And now you're up to well, there's 900 plus members, but you've got for the big Y, you're closer to 400. But the thing is, in all this searching, Zach is distance of 6 to me, and we're still trying to figure out, okay, where's the connection here? And in fact, Zach has some Charles Doherty, who is only a genetic distance of 2 to me, so it's like, okay, how do we get there? But it's keep digging is.
Yeah, so with your matches, the better the match, the more you can start working with hypotheses, and you've got different avenues to chase. You've got a different target you can play with. I mean, I think Zach and I connect like 600 years ago or something. So like, yeah, we're not closely related. So our haplogroups deviate way back. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like we're all Dohertys and we all eventually connect, but some of us connect within a genealogical time frame, and some of us connect centuries ago, and that's the big Y can tell you that. So if you connect and you've got like a close match and you've done all the big testing and you've got someone like a haplogroup that maybe came into existence in the 1700s, you now have people under there that you should be able to connect to in a genealogical time frame. So it does then increase your pool of people to research. So
Right. It's
yeah,
like
it's again,
like
like I said, it's using all the tools in your toolbox. It can, you've got to be a good researcher, but then the DNA can lead you different paths.
right. And 3 of my 4 grandparents were born in Ireland, and I've actually been back to the houses that they were born in. The Dohertys, however, came from Ireland to Canada to Wisconsin, and then my grandfather went to San Francisco, and that's where we are. But it's the oldest was a James, and so it was James and John, James and John, James and John, James and John. And but I finally was able to discover my actually been my father's first cousin, now my second cousin, because her father went by James, but he was actually baptized Leonard James.
Mm.
And he just went by his middle name. And it's you stumble over these things and it's like, oh, okay. But part of that was verified through autosomal DNA. And even in the autosomal DNA, I've had people contact me and say, I'm not a Doherty, but how come you're my closest autosomal match? And doing some research, talking to them, found out that there's somebody on my mother's side of the branch, side of the tree, who went over, it was a border in England before he came to America, and he left behind one of that branch. So, all these things, it's, a game of clue.
Yeah, it's taking a lot of different pieces of different shapes and sizes and trying to make them all fit. Did we have any questions in the chat? Did I miss any? I'm like,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mike. Excuse me. Zach is just asking if the chat's charts are going to be available. He's interested in Y700. How can he sign up?
I could go ahead and interject here. I mean, just following the link to the Family Tree DNA groups Doherty about that we linked in chat. That on the left hand side it has emails for administrators, which Bob is one of them, Eva, myself, and if you just click on mine and ask, for follow up, I could explain sort of, what tests, and when to do it, because I always recommend, like Michael mentioned, which is during sale periods. There's no reason to pay full price, when they go on sale half a dozen times out of the year. I mean, quite frequently and predictably. So in terms of charts, I'm not for sure what he means by what our chart's going to be made available.
Maybe
What I meant is just what Mike showed.
The lecture will be taped, so you can review that. Or if there's anything specific you want, you can just email me, and I'll put that in the chat.
So, and just a little plug, that link that Zach was talking about, there's a place that says donate on there. So if you aren't yet ready to do your test, or say you've already done your own test and don't know where to test now, but you want to help us with our project, please feel free to donate. If you're from the United States, we are a registered 501c3, so your donation is a tax deduction to you. We'll get you being the accountant I am, I'll make sure you get the proper documentation for your taxes. So
just like with Joe's question, like, about, he doesn't have good matches, so he may have to make his matches with maybe a collateral line or like a suspected collateral line to kind of make his line more robust. It's like, I've often dreamt, like, because of like this whole Michael Moore garbage, like there's many colonial lines that people just want to lump together just because they're named Doherty and they happen to be in the same state at the same time. That I would love to just go out randomly testing a lot of Doherty descendants, and would love to have a fund set up. And like I said, I'm just thinking out loud right now. We need to all figure out a good fundraiser for a Y-DNA so we can start helping all of us kind of further this tree, because it helps all of us as a whole.
Yeah, well,
and I've also put in the chat. Sorry, Michael, I put in the chat the Doherty Association email address if anybody else wants to get in touch.
Well,
yeah, if you write to the Doherty Association email, if it needs to be routed to any one of us, it'll get there.
Yeah, it will. And just know that those of us on the board are all volunteer. So any of the monies that we do raise go directly. Currently, right now, our big project is the Y-DNA. We've done other things in the past with fundraising, but that's kind of where all of our hearts are right now. So recognize that.
Yeah, it's like, so the big thing in the past, Y-DNA, big Y testing was, considered contributing to the scientific community. And so it's kind of like you did it for the greater good of education, for science, for anthropology. And so, but now we've been able to identify these SNPs down to a genealogical time frame. So with the Doherty group, Y-DNA testing helps us all. So it is one of those, like, you're spending money for the greater good, but you will get something out of it because it's not about anthropology anymore. It does have genealogical value. So as we build our bigger Doherty tree, you may be working on a line. You're like, oh, this guy was in the same county as my guy in the 1800s. Like, he must be related. If you find a tester on both of them, you find out your haplogroups are split by 600 years. You're barking up the wrong tree, because Y-DNA doesn't lie. And so, it helps us all, because as we add more markers and flesh out our DNA tree, then new testers or other testers can gain information from that. We can find out where everyone belongs. And it can lead you to more research avenues.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
By the way, I don't know if I put a controversial question into the chat, but I had attended the 2023 reunion, and there was some statement made that no one can trace themselves back to the flight of the chieftains except for the ones that went to Spain.
Well, and Mike, I just responded to your comment.
Oh, did
We
you?
want to be really clear that what that tour guide is doing in Ireland is not part of this association.
I understand that.
Okay, and
Yeah.
she has her own opinions and ideas about genealogy and research. And again, we're not trying to badmouth anybody, but we just happen to have a little bit different opinion about how we can build our clan history.
Well, that's very good to hear. I realize these issues come up. And what you just told me will help me very much with kind of further interactions there. That's exactly what I'm trying
Well,
to do.
but
So,
as a person who loves going over to Ireland, and I go there 2 to 3 times a year and we'll spend a month, I'm really happy when somebody wants to go over there and get a sense of what our common Irish heritage is. I've spent a lot of times for 20 years. I coordinated the reunion and had to step back for personal family health reasons and that. I
right,
wish there would be some younger people that would step forward and do that same volunteer event that happened in the past. And if there's tourism groups, there's a guy in West Donegal who's also a Doherty who is a tour operator and he does tours over there. I think that's great because people have an opportunity to tour and to do things that they might not have otherwise done. But it isn't our clan association reunion. And that's what we wish wasn't being advertised, I guess, to just be super clear. And I know this is recorded, but we've been dealing. I had 3 emails yesterday and 2 this morning about this same thing. So
right.
I just am trying to be really clear. I'm happy when people are entrepreneurial and they especially bring tourism to that part of Ireland. I think it's wonderful, you know.
Mhm.
But
And
to answer your question about the Spanish Dohertys, we have well, Bob, who was admin before me, that invited me to be an admin. They had tested Pascal O'Doherty, who was the brother to Ramon, who was in 1990 they had a chieftain of the name. I forget what it's. They since have done away with that like seeking those out because I guess there was a I forgot what surname it was, but there was a big kerfuffle or something that someone lied about something, so they stopped doing that. But anyways, I also targeted test a comedian in Spain, Alex. He volunteered. He's related to that Pascal who's now passed away, and they match each other as they should on the Big Y, and then they match the greater umbrella that Michael was showing for one of the larger clusters of related Doherty men. So we do, like, for instance, Michael and my line tie into theirs, match theirs at the haplogroup around 1400, 1350 to 1400 AD. So we know we're related to them as we should be. We just don't know specifically what ancestor that was. Now they have again a medieval Irish pedigree, depending on how reliable that is, that does have ancestor after ancestor after ancestor. But since we don't know of anyone else who has a pedigree like that, we can't triangulate on exactly who that ancestor is that we tie into with them. We just kind of know a time frame of potential ancestors if again that lineage, that recorded lineage in the Irish annals is correct, if that makes sense.
It is going to be, like as I mentioned in the lecture, like, if you find a published genealogy of your Doherty family back to the 1300s online, it's probably false. And that's where, like, when you do a Y-DNA test and you're like, who's your most distant ancestor, and you put a name, someone born in the 1300s, you really don't have the documentation to prove that, and it's very difficult to ever do that at all with any Irish line. And so be wary of any genealogy that takes you back that far. It's just not usually feasible. Um, like Zach mentioned, the Spanish Dohertys do have this ancient Irish lineage that seems to hold some water, I guess, to a certain extent, but like very few of us have that. And so that's where, because it's so difficult to do that, like Zach mentioned, we can sometimes find where we fit within a genealogical time frame, the 1800s, the 1700s, or do we connect in the 1400s? And that's where the big Y can start to separate us out. Does it put names to those? No. But very few of us can do research back to the 1400s anyway, whether it be Ireland or Germany or anywhere.
Any
But
country. Yeah.
through the big Y tree, like I said, like if Zach and I met on the streets and we're like, hey, my grandfather's Doherty and you're a Doherty, we must be related. Big Y shows that unless we're going to go back to the 1300s, we're not. And so, the big Y tree may be the best ancient tree that we're going to be able to put together. It's just not going to have names and dates attached to it because we can't.
Michael, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, because we know Irish records are limited and we can only get back so far, um, how would we know if somebody who was a Doherty that we reckon was born in 1830 and is part of the family, how would we know that how further back their Doherty connection would be?
So that's where, when we identify these mutations, what they call these SNPs that define certain, branches of the Doherty family tree, uh, the more people we test, the more of these we identify, the more we can then put dates on them. And so, for example, like with my family, because I've tested so many people under the same ancestor, I know the mutation that defines my line, and that mutation arose around the 1700s. So, much like in Joe's situation, like his test didn't really show a lot of matches, so he may have to make his own matches. Then that will define the certain mutations that define his line. And so, same thing. Like if you have a Doherty who's born in the 1830s or in a 19th century time frame, by testing a singular person, you may not, you will see in a bigger picture where they connect on a time frame. If you connect like a singular person in a tree, say they share a mutation that originated in the 1600s. Well, you've kind of placed them on the tree, but you may have to then test a cousin or a brother or someone to then identify. Sometimes it has to come in pairs. You have to test a second person then to better define your line. So DNA is always the most powerful in its comparative nature. Singular tests often, I mean, you can get lucky and a singular test can tell you a lot. But sometimes it's the nature of comparison that gives you more information. So say you have an ancestor born in 1830, you do a test on a male descendant, and you get kind of you don't have a lot of powerful matches. You do a big Y. Yeah, you connect under an umbrella of a mutation that occurred in the 1600s. It doesn't tell you a lot. So you have to test then maybe a cousin or a brother or someone in that same line that creates more information for you. So it's that comparative nature that gives you more information. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so if I had, for instance, two first cousins who were both descended from Dohertys and they both tested, would that be more useful than just having one of them?
That would be great. Yeah, two of them will give you more information. Yeah, of course, then if you big
Okay.
Y two people, that's a lot of money. But by I always tell when I do DNA lectures, I always tell people, let the known give the unknown more reason, more meaning. So you've got two known relatives, you know how they're related. They both test, and they say they both do a big Y. They connect where you expect them to connect. Everything's great with those two, but then you also generate more information. You generate, new haplogroups. You make more information, and you fit them on a tree more securely, and you identify specific markers that are unique to that line. So much
Okay.
that I tested multiple people along a descendant that I knew how they were related, their known relationship gave the unknown more meaning. I was able to create more information by testing known relatives to make the unknown have more meaning. It's so I know
Thanks.
where they more securely fit. So yeah, having two first cousins, big Y test generally gives you a ton more information. It's just a big investment.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
You
Appreciate
bet.
that.
Okay, Michael, I want to jump in here if I may, please.
Certainly.
My surname is not Doherty, obviously it's Perrin. And so I'd like to jump over to a block that I've hit on that line and use it as as an example that maybe can help other people. I can get back to my great, I think it's three great grandfathers born in 1787 in Pennsylvania. And then the line dies, and everybody that I've spoken to online, we all get stalled at the same point. So there's got to be some other parents that around the same time that are related. How do we find them? And I've done a big Y years ago, and there's only 3 people on my same group at 41 mutations down. There's only 3 people, only one of whom is named Perrin. The others are Youngblood and a Green. And then there's some other people, none of whom are named Perrin. Barton, Massey, Hammond, Doyle, another Massey, and a Perrin. Claude Perrin from Perrin, probably from France. You got any suggestions?
Um, these are the matches on your big Y.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it would depend on where those those big Y matches on like how closely they match or under what SNP or haplogroup umbrella they fall, how old that is. It's interesting if if your name's Perrin and you've got a parent kind of connection
Yeah,
that is a very interesting connection. That's
yeah,
again
Perrin name, yeah.
that's a situation again where sometimes you need the known to give the unknown more meaning. So it may be testing a known parent descendant on your line so that you can make that connection that generates more information and more definitive SNPs that define your line. It's for I don't know if Zach has any thoughts, but oftentimes things like that I've got to see it and contemplate it to give you more specific information. But it's kind of like in the same situation. Like I big Y tested myself, and like I have a haplogroup designation that was a mutation that occurred 1300 BC. So it's not meaningful because no other Lacopos have tested. So if I want to, drop another chunk of change and test even my brother or, my first cousin, like we'll generate a ton of new SNPs because we'll all share different mutations under that 1300 BC umbrella. So basically with unique names, so it's in with Doherty, the name is so common, we need big Y to parse us apart. With uncommon names, you just don't have a lot of testers. And so you fall under a SNP umbrella that's really old. And so your matches are pretty weak. And so you sometimes have to start getting more, getting more people to test to make your line more robust. So it may just be you are stuck in a informational void where you need to create your own information.
Well, I do have, my grandfather had, I think 3 brothers, and I do have the names of some of their offspring, so I can probably track them down. And I've been in touch with some second and third cousins from the Midwest. My grandfather was from Iowa, and there's a cluster of them in the Omaha area, one of whom I've talked to.
Well, I mean,
And
like, I guess the bigger takeaway or the big picture is that obviously in the of autosomal DNA, that's the standard like ancestry test. Millions of people have tested. It's just, not many people have Y tested and fewer people have big Y tested. So we are still, even though we're identifying new SNPs every day, like the tree's becoming more robust, the tree's becoming more genealogically significant. It is still a little bit of the Wild West. Like there's still informational voids, and we still need more testers where, we've got so many wonderful matches on autosomal DNA that sometimes big Y, we want kind of an automatic perfect match. And sometimes we have to generate more information. So, there are big voids like
yeah,
a Lacopo Y DNA is not going to be rewarding until I make it so.
well,
Um,
the good news is that my great grandmother was a Van Diemen, and I can run her back to the 1500s in Germany. So it was not all a loss, but I'm just really curious about the parents. So because I don't know whether they're English parents or French parents, I've heard stories that they're Huguenots who came over to England during the wars, the religious wars. And I just like to find that stuff out. But
Sure, yeah, I mean, but that parent and parent kind of connection, that's one way that like that looks like a promising French connection. It's just like it's so you've got a little bit of a clue to kind of latch on and follow and see if that gives you more information. But yeah, I think sometimes with Y-DNA, because it's just not as robust as like autosomal DNA testing, we do end up finding, informational voids. And we
okay, thank you very much.
yeah, you bet. We probably need to wrap things up because we're going on 2 hours here. I know we've got really, I could talk about this all night. But I'll let Eva kind of do our wrap ups. And of course, like I said, next month we'll be hearing Zach. And so you can email us questions. We can have more Q&A next month. But hopefully I didn't lose you too badly and this wasn't too overwhelming. But I really love the power of Big Y for what it can do for the Doherty family tree. Understand it's an investment, not telling everyone to drop $450 tomorrow, but consider it.
Yeah, and I am going to have a friend of mine that does video editing, and so my goal is to get that really weird interruption stuff off the video
Oh, cool.
from around, it was right around 30 minutes or so that came in. So, and we might have to go back to the whole concept of registering for the meetings. I know we got some pushback from people that said that they didn't want to have to give their information to Zoom and whatever else. And so I went, oh, okay, never thinking that something ridiculous like this would happen. So anyways,
It's not the first time it's happened to me, so.
oh, really? Maybe they're following you, Michael.
Yeah, well, it doesn't happen often, but it has happened. Yeah. Zoom bombing is a thing. I thought that kind of like lost its appeal after the pandemic, but I guess some people just still do that. So
Yeah, I'd heard of it, but yeah, never had experienced it. So I was glad Kathleen and I were ready to kick them off. But it's one of those things when you're trying to quickly get something gone, your mouth's like, go, go, go.
yeah, when you momentarily panic, then you just don't know what to do. So well, thanks everyone for
Yeah.
sticking with us through
All
that.
right, you guys, well, we will look forward to seeing all of you and more people. Obviously, we want to keep encouraging people to join us, but we will listen to Zach on the 17th, and I had popped the link in there, but we'll also post on Facebook and that kind of thing. But Michael, it was amazing. I learned so much. It's amazing how you can, I'm sure many of the things you said I've heard before in things, but things just landed today in a way that
Good. I'm glad. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not an easy topic to just skim over. You got to dig a little deeper, so it can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful Bob was able to join us and Zach too, and just have people that have spent volunteer time helping get this Y-DNA study off the ground and still continuing. So it's something we can be proud of.
Yeah,
More to
one thing I have to say, Zach has done such a fantastic job
Yes.
with the DNA stuff. When I left off around 2018, I had bypass surgery, and Carlene Doherty, who was the other administrator, she passed away, and Zach showed up on the scene, and he's taken this to a whole new level. Zach, you're unbelievable what you've done with it. So really
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
Thank you. It's just really fun hobby. So
Yeah, Zach gets all my kudos. He does a lot of work, and so um I I like digging into the paperwork. Of course, he's an excellent genealogist too, but like we compare notes on lots of matches. So his wealth of knowledge is amazing. So he's here to help us all.
Anyways,
Much
thank you guys.
appreciated.
Very generous.
All right. Well, we will all talk soon.
Okay.
And don't forget, you
Bye-bye.
guys, we have a meeting next week.
How do you save the chat?
I will get it on the recording and I can send it off to you. There should be the 3 ellipses to
Yeah, I
save,
don't see it
but
anymore.
I think
Oh,
when,
wait.
let me